During his 15-year career at Iowa Western Community College, Chris developed a passion for improving access to education, particularly for underrepresented groups of people. In 2015, Chris was elected to his first term on the Council Bluffs Community School District Board of Education and is now serving his second term. In 2017, motivated by a desire to give back to his community through more than just his volunteer work, Chris began his tenure as Executive Director at the Schools Foundation. Chris serves on several nonprofit boards and is passionate about improving Council Bluffs for all. Chris lives in Council Bluffs with his wife Leah and two daughters ages 13 and 11. Please welcome Chris LaFerla.
I'm going to pull this out of here. Okay. Well, it's game time, everybody. This is my first keynote presentation. First keynote. Are you impressed by that? My kids are not impressed. Yes, my kids are here, so I'd appreciate it if you laughed at all of my jokes. They don't think I'm funny anymore. Well, if you're not impressed, you shouldn't be, because I had to hire myself for this job, and I'm not getting paid. So, you know, we all start somewhere. That's my journey. Most likely it's going to be my last keynote presentation too, because this is terrifying. Before I start, I have to thank my teammates Bridget Watson and Nathan Schwery. Bridget Jedi mind tricked me into doing this keynote presentation, and they've both put in countless hours helping me prepare, and I thank you both sincerely for that. I also want to thank all of you for being here. Your presence means a lot to me personally, but it's also important to our educators because they see your attendance today as a demonstration of your support and validation that the work they do in schools every day is important, and I don't want you to take that for granted. So thank you very much. Let's see if I can get this to work. Call them audible. Nationally, there's a teacher shortage of somewhere 100,000 teachers. That's worse than it ever has been, and it's predicted to double by 2025. Now that shortage hasn't affected broader parts of the Midwest just yet, but it's coming, and it's happening rapidly. There are a number of reasons for that shortage, and I'll discuss those, but one thing is clear to me. We, meaning all of us in this room, are going to have to do something about it. Parents, business leaders, community members who care about the prosperity of the communities that we live in are going to have to take action. And that's why I'm here. Okay, thank you very much. You've been great. Education is everyone's business. Now, I wasn't at the foundation back when the board and the staff decided to start this tradition, but I'm so glad that they did because I really believe that statement to be true. Our schools affect us all. Whether you're parents or not, or whether you pay property taxes or not, it doesn't matter. Public schools are important to us all collectively because they have significant impacts on the systems we rely on daily, on our ability to elect capable leaders, and on the ability for communities to build the quality of life that we all want. In the earliest years of this country, public schools were intended to do just that, to advance the common good for all. Oh great, he's going to talk about the history of public education in America. Okay, just for a minute. Just for a minute. The Founding Fathers maintained that the success of this fragile American democracy would depend on the competency of its citizens. They knew that public schools would be vital to the prosperity of this new imperfect union. So public schools were created with very intentional purposes in mind. Now many of these are obvious, but there's a few that stand out to me, particularly with what's happening in our world today. To unify a diverse population. The Founding Fathers knew that building a country of immigrants from all around the world would present a unique challenge. How would we unify all of these people under one common American culture Well, they believe that when you put children from different backgrounds together in a common education setting, that class conflict could disappear and that we would interact with greater civility. And to improve social conditions, they put great store in the power of public education to eliminate poverty, crime, and a whole host of other social problems, and they were right to think so. The research on this is clear. People with more education are less likely to be homeless, to abuse drugs, to commit crimes, and so on. So public schools were created to be the safeguard of our new imperfect union and guarantee that we could continue to improve ourselves and our country through learning and through the acquisition of knowledge. So education is everyone's business. Now, when I started working on this project, my working title was, "We need teachers now more than ever," because it's true, in the literal sense, we're losing teachers, we need more of them. And figuratively, for all of the reasons that I just mentioned, teachers are vital to our society. But I realized that title needed to change. It's still true, we need teachers now more than ever, but that's too passive for where things are right now. And for reasons that I'll get into shortly, we're going to have to take action. Our teachers need us now more than ever. They need to know that we value the work that they do. They need our respect. They need us to advocate for them, not just for my kids and for your kids, but for our communities that we live in, for the society, for this imperfect union. In fact, I want to take a minute right now to recognize our teachers. They don't want me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. And retired teachers, would you please stand and be recognized? And I'd like to recognize the school staff that support our teachers and our students and school board members. Would you please stand and be recognized? You all don't hear this enough. Thank you for what you do. You are having an impact. Teachers had a significant impact on me. In fact, my teachers, my coaches and counselors, they saved my life. Without them, I would not be who I am today. And that sounds cliche, but it is the absolute truth. And I know that it's true, because statistically speaking, based on my childhood, I should not be standing on this stage talking to all of you right now. My family was poor, and not the good kind of poor, if there is such a thing. But you know, sometimes you hear people say, we were poor, but we were happy. We were poor, but we were rich with love. Or some of those other sentimental descriptions of living a simple life without much money. That wasn't us, we were a different kind of poor. My parents were both unemployed or underemployed for most of their lives. They both battled addictions to drugs and alcohol. And they came from homes where their parents were addicts and emotionally and physically abusive. My childhood was chaotic, even dangerous at times. We moved a lot. We were homeless every now and then, living out of cars. There were a lot of drugs in the house. Things were just unstable. I guess that's the best way that I could describe my upbringing. My parents weren't abusive, but I was definitely neglected. I was rarely supervised. I was home alone a lot. This is me in second grade. Seeing that picture now makes me laugh because I know I was an absolute terror as a kid. That kid looks pretty innocent, but trust me, absent of adult supervision, I did basically whatever I wanted. I wandered the neighborhood at all hours of the night. I didn't wear shoes very often, or much clothing at all for that matter. I was constantly dirty. I was like a feral cat. I'm sure that my neighbors saw me wandering around at all hours of the night and wondered if they should leave a bowl of food out for me or something. One of my earliest memories was coming home one day after school. The doors were locked, no one was home. And I played for a little while and sat outside and waited and waited. It got dark, I waited some more. Eventually it got really late and I was worried. A car pulled up, a man got out. I didn't know who he was, but he said, my mom sent him to come pick me up. I wasn't stupid. I knew that I shouldn't go with him, but I was scared. I didn't really know what to do, and I went with him anyway. And he took me to a house. My mom was there. She'd been using, and she eventually passed out. I laid down on the floor next to her and fell asleep. I was 8 years old, about the same age that I am in that picture. Side note, turns out that when you're poor and you move a lot, pictures and keepsakes tend to not survive all of that chaos. And then fast forward to the time when you're 45 years old and preparing for a keynote presentation you hired yourself to do, and Bridget Watson tells you, we need school pictures. And this is the only one that I have. Well, I really wish I had a picture from about 2 years after this, because I pierced my own ear. And it was the 80s, so naturally I wore a long dangly dagger earring. Millennials in the room. In the 80s, nothing said badass more than a long dangly dagger earring. And just ask Corey Feldman. School was the safest place in my life. My teachers were basically the only adults that I could count on. They looked after me, and not just while I was at school. My music teacher at the time enrolled me into a district-wide honor choir. And I remember practicing those songs at home on a cassette in the 80s. And once a week riding the bus to another part of town where we would rehearse with the full choir. We performed on live local television for Christmas. I mean, I thought I was kind of a celebrity. It was a big deal. But it was the first time that I felt special for something. That teacher was influential because her belief in me gave me something to look forward to each week and something to work for. By the time that I was in high school, I practically lived at school. I became involved in everything I possibly could. Music, theater, clubs, sports. Most days I got to school at 7 o'clock in the morning. I didn't leave until late into the evening. I wasn't great at all of those things, but it didn't matter because I was at school and I wasn't at home. My teachers did so much more for me than teach me things. They challenged me to be a better student and a better person. They helped me discover who I was, what was important to me, what I cared about, who I wanted to be, how I wanted to live my life. They helped me understand kindness and compassion. They basically raised me. Of course, at the time, I didn't realize or appreciate just how important teachers were in shaping me as a person. It wasn't until later I started working in higher education, and then later joining the school board, that I became more exposed to what actually happens in schools and what teachers really do, that I began to reflect on the role that teachers played in my own life. Shining a light on what teachers really do was something I wanted to bring to all of you today. And in preparing for this presentation, we went out and interviewed some teachers in the school district to talk about their roles in the classroom, what they love about teaching, and some of the challenges that they face. And I think it's important that you hear directly from them.
For whatever reason, I do think since sometimes people feel like since they've been to school that they know what teachers do all the time, and what you see us doing is about half of what we really do.
But I'm a classroom teacher. I am also a behavior specialist, depending on the day. I am a counselor to help students who need things that they're not maybe getting at home.
It's not just teaching them science, it's, helping them grow, mature. Maybe they need a Band-Aid one day, you're playing nurse for a little bit, here's a snack if your tummy doesn't feel good. It's all kinds of different things.
Sometimes we don't have the greatest boundaries of when does my job stop? And And I constantly find myself telling new teachers, I'm like, yes, you're correct. You're paid for this time. But to be an excellent teacher, you've got to give more of your own time. Whether it's going to a basketball game so you can say to the kid, oh my gosh, clutch free throws, or, going to the band concert and like, oh my gosh, you play the bass, it's bigger than you. Those are the things that let the kids know it's all about the relationships.
A few years ago, our keynote speaker at this luncheon was a man named Jamie Vollmer. And Jamie was the CEO of an ice cream company and also a harsh critic of public schools. He traveled the state, actually, and spoke to groups like this about how schools need to be run more like a business. He has a great story, but eventually that changed, and now he travels the country as a great champion for public schools. And Jamie put together this list of responsibilities that have been shifted to schools over time that he called the increasing burden placed on America's public schools. Starting in the early 1900s, schools were mandated to add health and physical education, home economics, vocational education, transportation requirements, business education, art, music, foreign language, driver's education, science, school lunch, sex education, consumer planning, career planning, drug and alcohol awareness, parenting education, special education, English as a second language, Jump Start, Head Start, Even Start, Prime Start, all the other starts if there are any, advanced placement, school breakfast program, teen pregnancy awareness, anti-smoking education, expanded health and psychological services, family services, child abuse monitoring, mandatory reporting. Now that's a lot, but that's just a part of the list, and I stopped at 1980. That list of mandates has multiplied in each decade since. Now Jamie would tell you that list doesn't say to our teachers, go teach our kids. It says, go raise our children. Some of those mandates were intended to enhance academic outcomes, but most were calls for schools to address social challenges. And on the whole, these are all good things. We need our schools to advance the common good for all. We need our schools to keep our kids safe and feed our kids, prepare them for the world that they're going to find when they leave our schools. But can we just take a minute and collectively recognize what we're asking our teachers to do? We've added so much and virtually nothing has been taken away. All of these things our teachers are mandated to do speak to the many roles that we expect our teachers to play. Counselor, role model, detective, nurse, parent, mediator, confidant. But it's not everything, because teachers are responsible and accountable to a variety of stakeholders: kids, principals, lawmakers, and parents, each with their own set of unique expectations. And let's be honest, some of these expectations are unreasonable, aren't they? Speaking of unreasonable expectations, where are my parents in the room? That was supposed to be funny. It's okay to laugh. I'm just kidding, parents. I'm a parent too, so I can say this with love and a reasonable amount of certainty. Parents be crazy. Yeah? Just a little? I mean, teachers, who are my teachers? All we really expect of you as parents is that you teach our kids all of the things and challenge them, but not too much. Make them love learning and doing their homework, but don't send home too much. We're busy in the evenings after all. And I kind of need you to be available after work for questions and on the weekends. Would you mind sharing your cell phone number with me? I'm going to text you tonight about something that happened at recess yesterday. And actually, you know what? Why don't you just add me on Snapchat? I can't wait. We're going to become best friends. Hey friend, I called last night, Sunday, 11 p.m. You didn't answer. That's okay. I just wanted to talk about that kid that pinched my daughter last week. Has he been expelled yet? Oh no? Okay. That's right. I'll just post about it on Facebook and email the school board and call Channel 6 News. 6 on your site, it's going to help me. All right, parents, that was a low blow. I'm sorry. I'm just poking fun. I love parents, but there's a little bit of truth in some of that. Despite the increasing burden that we're placing on our teachers, and all of the expectations that we have, whether those are reasonable or not. Teachers show up every day prepared to do the work. I've been around a lot of teachers, and my experience is that they're going to put up with a lot, they're going to take on more and more without complaint, and then they're going to go home every night and beat themselves up trying to figure out how they could have done it just a little better. Why? Why do they do that? It's because they care deeply about your kids.
The greatest thing about education is hands down seeing the growth that you are doing with kids. I've got into this for the kids.
Every single person I work with and every single teacher my kids have had, I think genuinely 100% care about their kid and want them to be the best they can be and would bend over backwards to do it.
They open up to you generally quite a bit. It really weighs on your heart what some of these kids are going through or what they're having to deal with outside of just the normal schoolwork and clubs and who likes me and who doesn't, all that kind of stuff. Relationships
is by far probably my favorite thing. You see it at school every day, but I'm probably gonna cry. Sorry.
I would say the vast majority of the teachers take their students and they metaphorically put them on their back and they put them in their hearts and they think about them all the time. It's a lifestyle. We have it with us at all time. And whether it was a negative interaction that I thought about and dreamt about that night or a positive interaction, I carry it home with me every day.
Making choices about which clips to share with all of you was challenging because they really invited us into their classrooms and into their hearts. And I wanted to bring at least some of that directly to you today because unfortunately, there are things that we're doing that are driving amazing teachers out of the profession. And some of us might not even realize that's happening. Before I joined the school board, I was pretty naive about how complex our schools are, how regulated they are, and just how significant our state legislature is in determining what happens or doesn't happen in schools. I thought I was paying attention. I thought I was knowledgeable. It's just difficult to understand it all. It's difficult to keep up with all of it, especially when the legislative sessions go by so quickly. Of course, the legislature determines how schools are funded, but they also debate bills every year that have significant impacts, not just on funding, but on mandates on curriculum, which services are provided, how instructional materials can be used, accountability requirements, transparency requirements, reporting requirements, how schools are measured for effectiveness, transportation, and on and on. To put it lightly, the last few legislative sessions have been tough on schools. There have been a number of controversial bills introduced, some of those have passed. This year it looks like a lot of them are going to pass. Now, I'm not going to debate or defend any of these bills. I think there are far too many people standing on stages like this and in front of cameras giving you their opinion as if it's some sort of universal truth. And that if you believe something other than that opinion, you're either woke or racist or unpatriotic or immoral. Productive debate requires respectful dialogue and a willingness to try and understand another point of view, not a lecture from someone like me. I'm also not going to say schools don't need to improve, because they do. And every superintendent, school board member, principal, and teacher I've ever worked with would agree with that. But it's not because we aren't trying. Improvement is baked into what teachers and principals work on every single day. And teachers are dedicated professionals that work hard on honing their craft. But what I will say about what's happening in Des Moines right now is that while opinions on the merits of those bills may vary, the impact that they have, and especially the rhetoric surrounding those bills, is hurting our teachers. Teachers read this stuff, they get the message, and it hurts. That's not up for debate. When bills are introduced that threaten to put teachers in jail for reading To Kill a Mockingbird, or fine teachers for helping their most vulnerable students through a personal crisis, or threaten to fire teachers for discussing race in America in any other way than what's vaguely defined in a law. It sends a clear message to our teachers. We don't trust you, we don't value your profession, and we don't think you're doing a very good job. Much of the rhetoric surrounding these education reform bills is based on false narratives, inaccuracies, exaggerations, and just outright lies about what's really happening in schools. And they're backed by a myth that public schools are failing our kids. And you all know this, but this stuff gets amplified in the media and online and from all sides. It feels a little ridiculous for me to have to say this out loud, but just to clear the air for everyone in this room, schools are not putting litter boxes in bathrooms, although litter boxes might be easier to clean up than some of the other messes in there. But this isn't true, but a lot of people believe these things. Teachers are not distributing pornography to kids. Teachers are not telling white kids that they're responsible for slavery, and they're not indoctrinating our kids in some sort of radical conspiracy theory. These are all false or misleading representations of reality, and they're being amplified in the media. And public schools are not failing our kids. Despite the burdens that we continue to place on our schools, they're performing better than they ever have. There is no investment that yields a greater return to the public good than public education. But just to recap, we're asking our teachers to do more and more. We're passing laws that limit what they can do in the classroom and threaten them with jail time, fines, or loss of their job. There's insufficient funding to pay them a decent wage. We're persecuting them in the media and online, and the message they hear from us over and over is, you're failing our kids. How can it be true that our schools are failing us? Aren't we failing our schools? If we don't do something about it, I'm afraid we're all going to be standing around asking each other this question: who is going to teach our kids? Because teachers are leaving the profession faster than they ever have. And not surprisingly, there are fewer people entering the profession. Now, I'm not a data scientist, but I think that's a pretty bad combination. Measuring the teacher shortage is tricky. There's no national or state clearinghouse for this data. States are all different how they report it, but this is a report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it's probably the longest running, most reliable metric that we have. This chart shows job openings in blue and hires in orange. In June of this year, there were 300,000 teacher openings and 200,000 hires, so a gap of 100,000. In February, that gap was 180,000. It would be incorrect to assume that the pandemic led to the teacher shortage. It had a small impact, but job openings began to outpace hires in 2017, and the gap is widening. The ratio of hires to openings is at an all-time low. This data gives some indication of what's driving that gap. It's teachers quitting, which is represented in blue. The gold bar shows layoffs, and the orange bar shows other types of separation. For the most part, layoffs and quits and other separations were relatively consistent year over year, with the exception of spikes in 2008 during the recession, and then at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. But since 2018, the number of teachers quitting the profession has nearly doubled. And that trend line suggests it's going to grow. To make matters worse, the National Education Association conducted a survey last year, and in January of 2022, 55% of teachers indicated they were planning on leaving the profession earlier than they anticipated. That was up from 37% just a few months earlier in August. Okay, Chris, that doesn't look very good. Lots of teachers are leaving the profession or considering leaving earlier than they anticipated. So how about new teachers? Will the new graduates make up for the loss? I don't have good news for you. Enrollments and completions in teacher preparation programs declined steeply from 2009 to 2014. In fact, those enrollments and completions are down 38% and 30% respectively. And during that same period, quits began to increase. Now hopefully enrollments in those programs will rise, but unfortunately I'm not optimistic about that either. This chart shows survey responses to the question, would you like a child of yours to become a public school teacher in your community or not? In 2018, the number of parents who would not want their child to become a teacher overtook the number of people who would for the first time since 1969, when they began administering this survey. More than 62% of parents would not want their child to become a teacher, and that gap is widening. In 1969, that was 15%. Just 10 years ago, it was only 31%. So teachers are quitting at the highest rate ever recorded. Enrollments and completions in preparation programs are down. And parents no longer are encouraging their children to become teachers. Why? Why are teachers leaving the profession or choosing not to enter? And why aren't parents encouraging their kids to become teachers? Is it poor pay, burnout, lack of flexibility, lack of support? That's what a lot of the research would say, and yes, that's true. All of those things matter. But all of those things have mattered for a long time. Pay and benefits haven't really changed much over time when adjusting for inflation. The job has been demanding for far too long. For many years, teachers have been leaving the profession for those reasons. So why now? Why are more teachers leaving now, and why are so few choosing to enter? About 6 months ago, I heard this quote listening to a radio story about teacher shortages. And I haven't been able to shake it since. In fact, when we started looking for a speaker for today, I was hoping to find somebody who would deliver a message inspired by this quote. Couldn't find anybody. That's how you wound up with me today. So you can blame Neil for that. Friends, we have to admit that our respect for teachers has eroded dramatically over the last few years. And we've got to face that before it's too late to turn it around, before the looming teacher shortage crisis claims Iowa as its victim. Regardless of how you feel about the education reform initiatives that are occurring in Iowa and around the country, the reality is you cannot have great schools without great teachers. And it doesn't matter if those are public, charter, or private. We have to have great teachers. Our kids deserve to have great teachers. So Iowa, let's do something about that. I'm not an educator and I'm not a lawmaker, so I'm no expert on this stuff. But let's redirect our focus to legislative priorities that lead to outcomes like these. Let's set legislative priorities that'll have a positive impact on all kids in Iowa. Let's return to a time when teachers were respected and teaching was a respected profession. They need to be paid more. They need more support. They need to be treated like the dedicated professionals that they are, and they need to be trusted to educate our future generations. At one time, Iowa was recognized as a leader in education, and we can make a swift return to that time. But we've got to get serious about investing in our teachers. And it will take investment, absolutely. But it's achievable, and really, we could do it right now. It wouldn't take much time, effort, or even funding to make this stuff happen. What would it look like if we achieved those things? Right now, we're going in the wrong direction. If lawmakers and state leaders don't rally around legislative priorities like these, I fear that we're all going to be affected by that teacher shortage. So the more important question is, can we afford not to make that investment? We need state leaders to make some of these things happen, but there are some things that all of us in this room can do, and I want to leave you with those. They're small things, they don't take much time, but they can have an impact. Assume positive intent. I've had the pleasure of being around teachers and administrators and school board members a lot the last 8 years, and I can tell you this, they all care about kids. They care about your kids, just like you do. We may have different ideas on how to achieve the best possible education outcomes, but we both care. We all care That's a great place to start. Share the positives. We all see the worst side of social media. We know that there's no way to control it. The only tool that we have for combating all that ugly stuff is to share the good stuff. So tell positive stories about the miracles that are happening in schools every day and encourage your friends and family to do the same. Finally, this is probably the most important one, we need to demand support for our schools. We can once again make Iowa the best state in the country for educational outcomes. It's possible, and it'll benefit all of us if we do. Ask our lawmakers to support our schools. Ask them to invest in teachers with adequate pay and resources, and ask them to support our teachers with their words and their actions. Business owners, business leaders, we need you for this. Our lawmakers are listening to you. Your voice carries further down the halls of the Capitol building than ours does. Now, I know you probably don't want to carry that burden for the rest of us, but we need you to use your influence. Our teachers need you, our kids need you, and our communities need you. The research on this has been consistently clear for generations. The success of schools has a direct economic impact on local communities. Successful schools result in stronger neighborhoods, increased industry, and higher property values. The opposite is also true. When schools struggle, communities and neighborhoods deteriorate, businesses move out, and property values plummet. Education is everyone's business. Earlier I shared some of my story with you, and I want to close by bringing that story to an end. I broke the generational cycle of poverty for me and for my kids. One thing that I know about being poor and experiencing trauma in childhood is you develop an internal belief that you're not worthy. You believe that you don't deserve nice things, that you don't deserve to be happy or treated with love and kindness. You develop a belief that you're not capable of being anything other than a poor kid. The Council Bluffs Schools, my teachers, my coaches, they saved my life. They challenged me to be a good person. They demanded that I give the best of myself. And they convinced me that I could be more than what I saw at home every day. I became the first person in my family to graduate from college. By my own definition, I've had a successful career. I have the most amazing family. And now, I'm here, doing everything that I can to give back to this community that I love. That is the true impact of teachers. Thank you.